What's up, guys? I'm at West Oxfordshire Sailing Club and I'm with Ben and Ben from the Royal London and from Rutland Sailing Club, and they're going to give you some of their top Firefly speed tips today, and we're going to go over some mistakes which we sometimes see beginners make and give you some advice on how to sail your Firefly a bit quicker.
Hi everyone, I'm Ben from Rutland, as George said, and I've been sailing Fireflies my whole life. Everyone in my family sails Fireflies, so I've got some good time in the boat. And I'm going to give you guys one top tip I've seen a lot of university sailors maybe not getting to grips with this year, even from Bucks fleets at the start of the season. Okay, so obviously going along in a Firefly, we're trying to squeeze the main in quite a lot, and you can really pull it on quite tight. And I think people are quite good at that, being strong on the main sheet. But something to watch, especially in lighter conditions like we have today, and when it's a bit more breezy, even in the medium stuff, is watching somewhere where you may not be looking at the moment, and that's the top telltale, right at the top of the main. The little blue one that's hanging down, most boats will have that. And what you need to be really careful of is closing that off. You want to have that telltale flying probably 70% of the time at least. And when you really squeeze the main in, you're at risk of closing that telltale off and losing some of the power of the top of the sail. So my top tip would be, especially in lighter winds, be careful of oversheeting. It's not a laser, you don't need to go around block to block the whole time. When you can, squeeze, but then have that awareness of the top telltale and be ready to ease the main a little bit every now and then, just to keep the flow going over the whole sail.
Hi there, my name's also Ben. I'm a local from West Oxfordshire Sailing Club. I'm the captain of the London Foxes team, and I grew up sailing Fireflies. It's the main boat that we sail here. I wanted to talk to you really quickly about rig tension and the forestay. So in a Firefly, we've got kind of two things pulling the mast forwards. That's the jib and the forestay. And the basic idea I think we have here is that we don't really ever want the forestay to be under any tension. It's just there if the mast falls down. So what we quite often see at team racing events, especially on the uni circuit, is that the forestay will be taking tension, and that's because your rig tension is too loose. So if your jib is all floppy and your forestay is nice and tight, that generally says to me that, okay, maybe we've not got enough rig tension on. So pulling on a bit of rig tension so that the weight is definitely on the front of the jib. And then your crews will really thank you for that, because the minute that you've got a kind of a leading edge of the jib that's too kind of curved and it's too floppy, they're not going to be able to get any kind of pointing out of the jib.
So my top tip today is about where to sit when we're sailing upwind. So something which I see all the time when I'm coaching teams is that you've got helms sitting all the way back here. And in actual fact, to get the trim really nice, especially upwind in the Firefly, you're going to want to be much further forwards. You're going to want your bum up on this part, right near the thwart. So you're going to have your bum maybe even leaning forward slightly, your legs further back, and your legs, you want your knees to be together. So something I also see when I'm coaching beginners particularly is that their legs are going to be apart, their knees are going to be apart, and that makes it really hard to hike. Once you've got your knees together, you're going to be much more efficient at hiking. You're going to have a much stronger body position, a much more stable core, and that's going to help you sail a bit faster and have your trim right.
So currently I'm holding the tiller extension, and I would say this is quite an apt one because it's red for a reason. And that's because you don't want to use this as much as is possible. We have the rudder, but what you'll see a lot of good teams be able to do is actually sail around without the rudder. And what I mean by that is using it as little of it as possible. Because what you should know, hopefully, is that every time you're turning this, it's acting, whilst it's acting as a rudder, as a steering tool, it's also acting as a brake, so it's slowing you down. So, some top tips would be potentially to go around as much as possible and try and steal something from 420. So a lot of laser sailors or fever sailors or terror sailors will go around doing what we call like a dagger grip. We're holding it in front of us. Try, maybe for a few races, putting it behind you and holding it on the deck, and just see how it feels and try and minimize the amount of rudder you can use. So try things like using your sails, using your body weight and the roll of the boat to turn, and see, yeah, if you can reduce using your rudder a little bit, I think you'll find the boat speed gains are quite helpful.
All right, so my next tip for you is something I see at lots of team racing events is you're just getting into boats. Hopefully no one's going to be messing up your boat for you, but these things happen, things just change. Sometimes sails just fall down. So your sail falling down, sails are designed for exactly to be at the top of the mast, and they're very carefully made in that way. So the minute it's coming down even a little bit, it's going to really affect the flow of the sail. So a couple of tips for team racing Fireflies. So this is your main halyard pulling at the main sail. We've got the cleat here. Hopefully this cleat's really good, but often actually that's not the case. So a little tip for you just to make sure your sail's not going to slip down mid-race. Something that I like to do is, as I'm pulling up the sail, I actually do it with the boom off, so I can get it right to the top of the mast. Lots of these sails are quite old, so they're actually going to stretch a little bit, so it can be good to get it to the top of the mast. So what I like to do is pull it all the way up with the boom off here, and then I'll pop it in the cleat. Now this is all good if it doesn't slip, but what I quite like to do as an extra safety measure, I get my crew to ensure that it's jammed into the cleat, and while they're doing that, I'll go to the main sheet and I'll just a couple of times just pull down pretty hard on this. And what that does is it just really makes sure that that halyard's jammed in the cleat and it's not going to move in the middle of the race.
So another thing that I see beginners doing all the time is holding their main sheet wrong. So something which Ben mentioned earlier was dagger grip. And that is something you're always going to want on your main sheet. So a lot of beginners, I see them holding their main like this, kind of an underhand grip. And that makes it really hard to play your main when you're going upwind. You're stuck here and it's really hard to switch hands and pull hand over hand. So instead, you should have your main in that dagger grip all the time. And that makes it really easy when you've got your tiller extension to pull hand over hand and get lots of tension on.
Okay, my final tip is, I feel like everybody knows that you don't want water in your boat. That's slow, extra weight, that's bad. But I think something people do get wrong is realizing that it doesn't look like very much water, but it's having a big effect. So I've got here about 3 litres of water, 3 kilograms, and I'm going to pour it into my boat, into my dry boat, and we can see what this looks like. So our boat is tipped all the way forwards at the moment, so it looks worse at the front. There's nothing at the back. And I think most people would agree that doesn't even look like very much water. But that's 3 kilos. People worry about helm crew combinations that are a couple of kilos heavier than someone else. This is your biggest change I think you can make. Dry boat all the time, even if it looks like a little bit, get it out. It's just going to help you go faster.
Thanks to Ben and Ben for their tips. And if you enjoyed this, like and subscribe for more.